Welcome to EB Insights, the podcast for anyone responsible for developing or promoting their company's employer brand. Here, we interview a wide range of experts in HR, talent acquisition, marketing, and communications to discuss hot topics in employer brand, employee engagement, and the employee experience. I'm your host, Sandra Dreyer, an employer brand strategist for over 15 years and the chief marketing officer at Cliquify, the world's #1 employer brand activation platform. And I want to welcome you to today's show. Welcome to EB Insights, Cliquify's platform for sharing trends and insights into the ever-changing world of employer branding. This content is created by practitioners for practitioners because our goal is to keep employer branding at the top of every company's business agenda. So I'm very excited today because this is our first in a series of podcasts talking about sort of hot topics in employer brand. And I have a great, exciting guest that's joining us today, Joel Lalgee. He's the founder of the Realest Recruiter, which is a business he founded to help clients and candidates find solutions for their hiring and career needs. Many of you probably best know Joel because he has a huge social media following under the Realest Recruiter on Instagram and TikTok all over. And he posts great, really authentic content on teaching recruiters how to really build their brand online to help them attract top talent. And he also works with companies all over the world to help them build training for their recruiting teams. And he is joining me today to talk about some hot topics, get his take on those areas in employer branding that are really trending right now. So welcome, Joel.
Sandra, it's so great to be here. Excited that this is the first episode as well. First is always the best, I say.
First is the best. And I could not have chosen a better guest. Joel, I had the pleasure of actually meeting you in person last September at RecFest.
Yes.
But of course, I've been following your insanely amazing creative content on Instagram and TikTok. You have such a cool way of really simplifying what candidates want to hear so that recruiters can kind of change the way that they approach and they think about talent attraction. And you're also really helping recruiters build their own brands in the process. What in all of the great content that you're following, I mean, you have more than 400,000 followers on your channels. What are some of those topics that are really trending right now? What are you seeing that's getting a lot of engagement in what you're talking about?
Yeah, look, for me in particular, the content that I think is resonating the most with people right now is conversations around kind of corporate politics and kind of how the corporate world, how to operate in the corporate world. And so I'm finding that what's hitting a lot of the nerves, if you want to say, of like my audience is almost like how to play the corporate game. Talking a lot about remote work. I think there's a huge conversation around the return to office and quiet layoffs, for example. So is the return to office really just a way to lay people off? I think there's still a lot of layoff conversations obviously going on. A lot of conversations right now around like productivity. Productivity is a real key word for 2024 and how AI and automation is going to impact that. And so I feel like with a lot of the content that I'm putting out right now, it's really, really resonating with people around, how can we even kind of trust companies, which sounds terrible, but it's in line with our conversation today, right? Like how do you kind of build the trust with people? How do you build trust with employees and future employees in the midst of financial uncertainty and what's going on in the market and all this type of stuff? So definitely timely. And then far what I'm seeing as well, seeing a lot more people recording their own layoffs. I think this is like trend going on, which I think is really, really interesting. Seeing a lot of content right now around just like job search and how to kind of navigate the job search in 2024, how to network, how to use AI on the job search, which I think, it's obviously going to happen more and more and more. And a lot of people right now just talking about how you can't even apply for jobs anymore. Like there's no point in applying for jobs. You've got to rely on your network. So lots of fun conversations on social media, and I'm creating some of the content, but I also get to consume a lot of the content as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's so funny. You think about, even 5, 10 years ago, could you imagine people recording their layoffs? I mean, that just the proliferation of authenticity and, the employee experience not living in the four walls of the company anymore. I mean, it is just out there. It's such a huge difference. And,
Yeah.
it has, I have to imagine it has a permanent impact in the way that companies talk about the employee experience and really talk about culture and how they value and reward and motivate employees.
It's it's really, I mean, I just think about when I jumped into the workforce in 2011. So I was like coming right off the Great Recession, and it was like things were starting to get better. There's still a pretty tough job market. But I remember getting my first job and just thinking like, wow, like there's so many things that are wrong here, and I had some good people along the way, but there was just a lot of like not great stuff going on. And I just think, wow, if I had the same ability that people have today, like I think of like Gen Z today, like they have a problem with anything,
Mm-hmm.
they will get on social media and they will talk about it, and it's amazing that I don't think people really understand the power unless you've experienced it. I don't think a lot of people really understand the power of being able to shoot a 30-second video with little to no effort and literally get 8 to 10 million people viewing the video. It's insane, and I think it's almost like a leveling the playing field. And I think for companies, it's kind of a scary thing because you don't control the PR anymore for your company. Uh, for better or for worse. Like there was a case, I think this is maybe a couple of years ago, where Ocean Spray, they had a guy, I think you will remember that video, right? Where it was like the guy drinking the ocean and he's like just got laid off or whatever. He's on a skateboard. It goes viral, and it happened to be their best marketing play of the year on social media. So that was really positive. But now you're also getting like these layoffs, or just like people have the ability to make a video about anything negative that happens, and that can be scary if you're trying to control your image, and if you're trying to control what people see and hear about you. So it's really really interesting, and I think it's not just on TikTok and Instagram it's happening. I'm seeing it on LinkedIn as well. I think another platform where we see more people opening up about these things. So very interesting times.
Well, they feel empowered and rewarded as well. And, you know, in that vein of what the world was in 2023 and sort of all of the layoffs and the silent layoffs that we saw, kind of going back to that idea of trust and institutional trust and thinking about the long-term impact it has on employer brand. So all of the people who be watching this will in some way touch employer brand in their everyday, or talent attraction in their everyday environment. So I was taking a look just before we got on the podcast about just what some recent stats might be around institutional trust. And PwC does an annual trust survey. So their 2023 trust survey, I was reading through, found a couple of interesting stats. One was kind of comparing what employees felt might have been what they call a trust damaging event in 2023 versus executives. So
Mm.
54% of employees reported seeing or experiencing a trust damaging event at their company, while less than 20% of business executives reported their organization going through any kind of incident like this. So there's a huge gap there. Within that sort of trust damaging event, employees were citing bias or mistreatment being the largest contributing factors. And only a third of the employees think that the business executives actually give appropriate attention to earning trust. So, earning trust internally and earning trust externally. So, there's clearly a gap in perceptions between employees and leadership. And there's clearly a gap in employees feeling like that's even a priority or on the agenda of executives. So, given the past year and all the events that we've been talking about, the layoffs, the return to work mandates, Do you think that there is a longer term impact on that when it comes to an employer brand, employer reputation, that lack of trust? Or do you think it's a sign of the times? And when the economy comes back, then all of that will be forgotten.
I think it's a little bit of both, to be honest with you. I think there is kind of like the sign of the times where, okay, you have a lot of layoffs going on, it's a tough job market. Because we're also seeing right now, like, you could say that like loyalty to companies is at a high point compared to where it was with the Great Resignation. But really, all that is people just know it's a brutal job market and they don't want to leave and quit their company. So
Mm-hmm.
the company might view it and go, "Wow, look, we're having an amazing year. We're having such great retention," but it's really just the fact no one wants to quit because they know it's a tough job market. Um, and I also think, like, even looking back at 2021, it's like we were happy with what was going on, right? Like, companies weren't, but everyone else was happy. Like, hey, I'm gonna leave and I'm gonna make 30, 40K more. I'm gonna do the same job.
Mm-hmm.
I got 5
They were
offers
almost
going on.
trading. They were trading roles with another person who was thinking the same thing in a sense. So it's kind of interesting how that worked out.
And no one was complaining about it. Everyone's like, "Oh, this is we're getting we're getting just money thrown around. This is a great time." So I think when the economy kind of gets back to most companies in that growth mindset and there's more hiring going on, I do think that people will sort of forget about some of this stuff. I think where the change will come is, I think there's just, with social media and everything that's going on and a lot of the voices that are emerging on social media, I think that people aren't gonna. I just don't think people are gonna buy in, to just empty culture conversations. Or, like, I just think in recruitment we're told, like, we've got to sell the role, right? Like, you got to sell the position in the company, and we're kind of always hearing the same things, like, we've got a great culture, we empower our people, if you work really hard you'll get promoted here, we like to promote from the inside. So you hear a lot of the same jargon, and I think the companies that kind of understand how to cut through that noise, from everyone from your recruiters to your managers to leadership, I think there's got to be a new narrative out there. And I don't know 100% what that is right now, but I think we're collectively going to have to get to that point where, yes, we talk about the positives of working and why you should come work for the company, but I think there's a level of transparency and authenticity which people are just going to demand. So if you tell me, you know what, the job requires 70 to 80 hours of work and you're not going to have much work-life balance, great, then just tell me that, right? Tell me that up front. That's okay if that's what you're looking for. You'll find someone who that's right for. I think that the time of just trying to attract everybody and just trying to, like, make it a fit for every single person, I think that's going to change, and I think we're going to start to see more just transparency. And it will start with employer brand and marketing, and it will, recruiters they'll have to get good at knowing, like, all right, is this the right candidate? Like, I don't need to sell everybody, get appealing to everybody even necessarily. So yeah, and then I see that again on, even, it's so funny on social media. I see this more and more. Like, I've taken Instagram recently and seen a lot of success on that platform, and I've seen just a shift in what videos perform well, and it's usually videos that don't have a lot of production, videos that um, are just me kind of talking into the camera, like almost like a FaceTime call. And I think of, like, what Instagram was when I used to use it a lot more, 5-10 years ago. It was always like perfect perfect
Produced.
images. Yeah, it was always, what was that? What was it? Filter, perfect filter, and everything's great.
Yeah.
And now I'm seeing that type of content. It's just not as engaging and is interesting to people. And I think there's a lesson then for, employer brand, recruitment, marketing, recruiters. Like, look, take a lesson from that. Like, we want to have authentic messages. We don't just talk about culture in a bland way where we're not really saying anything. We want to understand our culture and speak to the heart of what our culture is, so we can actually find the right person, not just anybody.
Yeah, I mean, it's always, you have to remind, the goal of talent attraction is not numbers, not quantity, it's quality. You'd actually
100%.
rather have fewer applications because they're more targeted, because the more, influx that you're having to manage, the less urgently you're getting back to your top candidates. It's just creating this kind of bottleneck. So to your point, the transparency and authenticity about, here's the kind of person we're looking for. And if you are that person, here's what you would get here is very important. And, to your point about sort of the proliferation of social media and the honesty that employees are having about their experiences, I look at it as, yes, it is a bit of a sign of the times. You could say, there was a lot of loyalty during COVID too, because people were not hiring and everybody was kind of in a wait and hold pattern. And then post COVID, there was another shift where it was, now we need to right size our organization. I think there will always be those events. We can always say, well, that
Exactly.
was a one-time event. Well, the Great Recession was a one-time. Well, there's always going to be those election years. There's always going to be something that you're kind of in a wait and hold. But I think the spirit of, that information and content in social media doesn't die.
No.
And the risk you take that it gets into the hands of the wrong person, meaning the person you want to attract, if it is not a message that resonates with you, is pretty large. So I think there is that, that it's okay to say this may not be the right place for you, but this is why, it is the right place for the right person.
We almost got to figure that out too. Like, I don't know if there's anybody who's like grasped that fully. And even like, how do you articulate that? Because it then is like, I think we're okay when you ask a candidate, what's your biggest weakness, right? Or what's your biggest challenge? What's your biggest opportunity? But like,
I work too hard.
Yeah. I'm just too detail oriented for
Too
anybody.
detail oriented.
But it's almost like a side of like looking and go, okay, what's our biggest area of opportunity? And
Yeah.
just so often it's just like, so I always there's some of my videos, I'll say the dumbest question you can ask in an interview is, what is your culture like? Because you'll never get an honest answer. You'll get the, I have the recording in my brain of what that is, right? And we all do. Like, we all know what people are programmed to say. Instead, you've got to ask questions around, how do you deal with someone who isn't performing? How do you deal with this? How do you deal with that? You've almost got to ask situational questions. And so I think companies that grasp that, though, and they understand that, like, someone's going to grasp it and it's going to be authentic, and they're going to see more targeted marketing, and they see that, like, exactly what you're talking about, the quality of the right candidates coming in instead of just like mass candidates where you got to sift through and it just takes a bunch of time.
And I think, there's a whole conversation about how do you rebuild trust with employees that you may have lost it with. And if you think about, back to that PwC trust survey, there's clearly a disconnect between what business executives think is happening and what employees think is happening. So I think the first step is identifying, what your employees feel about not just your culture, but about sort of the environment that you're giving them day to day, and how, do they feel that this is a place that, rewards them congruent with the effort that they're putting in. And then, thinking back to, if it's not, how do you rebuild that trust? I mean, and I go back to your point of honesty. Is the force back into work the silent layoffs? Wouldn't it just be, this is where we are, here's where the economy is, here's where we are. And because you always kind of go back and go, well, why do I need to go back into the office? I mean, what is it that I've never ever seen, and maybe I could be proven wrong, but I've never really seen compelling data that says you're more productive if you are forced. I think some people are more productive in an office because everybody is a different type of a working style. But I don't think there's data that says everyone is more productive if you make them commute and get into an office. And that's this sort of lack of authenticity that I think is a huge issue for companies.
Look, I talk about this all the time. I'm like, I think at a certain point, you got to just acknowledge, like, hey, we're hiring an adult here. And as like an adult who's working, there has to be some trust in what it takes to get the results that you're looking for. And so, look, if genuinely, I'm super distracted at home, I can't work from home, and that you've got to go to the office to get a project done. Or, for example, if you're leading a team and you're like, man, I've really got to get the team together. And so you hold an office meeting, like, that's part of your job, and just knowing like what it takes to be successful. I think that I did a video recently on this that it got like probably 7 million views altogether on platforms. And it was basically, I think there's an issue with control with a lot of these things where when people work from home, you have to trust them. and
Mm-hmm.
you might not get the 100% focus that you would maybe get in an office, right? Because in an office, you're going to be thinking about the job only. I do think that when you start adding work into home, there are the things that could potentially take some of that 100% dedication, but it's this kind of control that companies have had over people, right? We own you. We're going to pay you a salary of 250, 300, whatever that salary is. We own your time. We own your focus. In an office, I think it's easier to control that. And so but I think people have tasted like, hey, I can actually like fit work around my life, and now I don't have to miss these important events in life as well. So this is just like such a not an easy topic to go, okay, here's the right answer, here's the wrong answer. But I think the one wrong answer I do know is when you are just kind of forcing people to do something without giving them, like you said, like, look, here's the statistics, or here's your performance. It clearly dropped in this situation. Now we need to bring it back. This is the business case for it. And I actually saw an article, it was about a month ago, from, I think they studied like 124 like return to office situations, and they didn't see any gains in productivity or even profit with the company as a whole. So until there is some really, really clear data for that, or until you can go to somebody and say, hey, look, your performance has drastically dropped here from being at home, I think it's a mistake to try and just force people with no reason, because that doesn't help with everything we're talking about with trust and like feeling like, oh yeah, they actually care about me as a human, and they care about the fact that I might have to miss my daughter's baseball game, or my
Right.
my son's event, right? And just seeing people as like, yes, we hired you to do a job, but you're a human outside of the job as well, and that matters. And again, I think these are hard
Yeah.
things for companies, right?
Well, and just keeping on the theme of trust, it's one thing, do the employees trust the company is looking out for them? But there's another thing when I feel like the company doesn't trust me as an employee, that you feel you need to watch me for 8 hours, because if left to my own devices,
I know.
I'm not gonna work. I'm gonna tell you I'm working. So there's that element of trust as well. So let me ask you, just kind of flipping the coin. We've seen a lot of big companies announce these layoffs, and obviously there's been sort of an impact. Clearly, there's been an impact to their overall brand and reputation. Do you see any opportunities for maybe those smaller, lesser known companies right now to kind of jump in the conversation and say, hey, by the way, this
Yeah.
is sort of how we do things? And have you talked about that, or seen anybody talk about those kinds of opportunities?
Look, I think particularly on social media, which I think is a great channel to talk about your company and to get people interested in your company and really just recruit people. I think social media is really, really underutilized. For a lot of smaller to mid-sized companies, there's a massive opportunity. And the way that you mobilize people is by even just doing something simple like training them on how they can use a platform like LinkedIn, like just giving them basic training. Like it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be anything intense, but like, or giving them the collateral and incentivizing them to talk about the company. These things are, because again, with really, really large companies, there's usually PR involved and there's legal teams, and they're kind of scared about individual employees posting, because how can one individual kind of represent the whole brand as a whole if the brand's a monster? But if you're a smaller company or a mid-sized company, you don't always have those limitations. So I think there's a
Mm-hmm.
massive opportunity. And again, like with what we're talking about, with this authentic content and allowing your people to have a voice. Again, I think smaller and medium-sized companies, you almost have a little bit more of a knowledge of who your employees are. Like it's a lot easier to know, hey, we've got a company of 50 people. All right, well, you kind of know all 50 people, right? 500 people, 1,000 people, it's still that's kind of smaller company feel. And then you get to a company with like 20, 30,000 employees. That's where I think it gets hard to control. So I think a great way to kind of empower your employees is to show them some basics on like how you can post on platforms like LinkedIn or Instagram, wherever your following is, and start to encourage and incentivize that type of activity. Because studies show as well, like people, when they look at your career page, it's not as trustworthy, right? But if they look to
Right.
your social media pages and they go, oh wow, look at what these employees are saying, it's just more social credibility. So I think there's a massive opportunity for that. And I think that's how you kind of connect with people, because obviously you're not going to be able to compete against a lot of these larger companies, maybe when it comes to compensation. But I think there is this like level of people connecting with other people at the company, people connecting with your mission, people connecting with the fact that like, you know, you're kind of normal people. It's not always about the money. And so I think there's a massive opportunity for that. And I feel like it's something that a lot of companies are just missing out on, and it's not that
Yeah.
complicated.
And especially in the world of authentic social content, as you talked about earlier, with Instagram not being so, you know, beautified and produced right now, and being able to be really authentic, it doesn't require video editors to really put
No.
together that kind of a marketing plan. And that, I know that you deliver training at the Realest Recruiter. You work with companies to really help train primarily recruiters initially, because obviously that's the first, you know, line of defense when you're actively recruiting, but just in general, trying to train people on how to be stronger and better social advocates. So the final thing I kind of want to talk about is really talking about, how do you create? So for anyone who's listening here, that yes, we've talked about doing an, you know, advocacy program, or we've talked about empowering employees. I don't know where to get started. So a couple of stats, and I promise I'll stop with my stats, but
No,
another,
stats are good.
I do like to just ground it in, it's not just opinion.
No, it's
So
great.
Edelman did a study on trust of candidates, or trust of people outside of an organization when it comes to an employer's reputation as an employer. So I think they said 75% of the people that they surveyed trust information shared by average employees more than information shared by an executive or by a company. So to your point, it is a corporate page, an executive doing a talking head LinkedIn profile, or an average employee talking about their company. And then on the sort of other side of that equation, Stanford University did a study that showed stories. So personal stories are 22 times more memorable than facts alone. So those stats alone will tell you there is obvious desire externally for candidates to hear from your employees and to hear their authentic stories. So with this in mind, you know, we talk about what's happened with trust. We talk about some of the, you know, be honest and authentic. What advice do you give companies right now on where to start? How do they start creating an environment where it's something employees want to do and it's something they're encouraged and rewarded to do?
Yeah, look, the biggest thing that stops people from posting on a platform like LinkedIn, for example, or any kind of social media platform, is usually just like fear of what other people are going to think. So I think if you
Right.
can identify maybe a few people on your recruitment team, maybe it's on your sales team, whoever it is at the company, identify a couple people who don't have that fear, first of all. And then just some really basic training. Like there's basic training available on like how to write a post or how to do an image, or like, you know, basic kind of social media training can go a long way. And then you start to, you know, I always recommend having at least somebody in leadership, someone who's, you know, maybe a director level and above. You got to have somebody in that position also doing it, because it's really hard to get people to do stuff for you unless you're doing it yourself. So getting
Right.
someone in leadership to do it, and then just giving some basic training on how to do it. And then if you can, incentivizing and gamification, like tracking how many posts people are doing, like taking it seriously, right? It's just like in sales. You never just be like, all right, go sell. Like you'd say, how many calls did you do? What's your pipeline? So I think you got to have some metrics in play, got to have some gamification. All of this is really not that complicated. I mean, you could do a 2 to 3 hour training on a lot of these things. And because again, the training is, I think a lot of people actually know how to do this stuff. It's just the training can kind of reinforce what they're already thinking. So they go, oh, okay, yeah, like I'm okay to do this. Um, and you know what I always recommend is like you want to post around company events, company and industry news, relevant things that are going on within your industry, and you just creating like a buzz around what's going on. And what I've also found is that it helps to really attract talent, but it also helps people feel more attached. Like I've got a friend, he makes videos for a recruitment company he works for. And part of one of the divisions, they actually make a lot of these videos for their clients, like these corporate videos. And what he's noticed is like whenever he puts out like a really well done video, or like a video that does capture a story, it's like he'll get DMs from people who work there, and what he's realized is it just allows people to feel like they're a part of something, which increases
Mm-hmm.
retention, which is just obviously a huge thing as well. Sorry, can you hear my kids there?
Yeah, no, it's good. It's fine.
All
Nope,
right, all
all
right, all
good.
right. Um,
We are
talk
real. We are real people with real
the
lives.
the realist recruiter with 3 real kids. But yeah, I
Three
think
very
that's a
real
piece of
kids.
it too. It's like people they connect then with it, and they're more excited. And I think
Yeah.
like especially like again like I think people who are coming into the workforce, they're going to be more apt when social media because that's just a part of their life. So I think if you're creating that buzz online, like people like I've never seen anybody get excited about that company online and not be excited about that company offline. It's this
Mm-hmm.
weird thing that
Exactly.
happens. Like no one's going to talk really great about your company online and offline and be like, I hate this place.
Yeah.
The people who don't talk about it, they're probably the ones who are like, I hate this place. But it's almost like you're giving somebody like a sense of pride about what they're a part of and what they're doing. And so if you can help facilitate that, it does go a long way. So I say like in the companies I've seen do it really, really well, it's always come down to like training and then 1 or 2 people in leadership doing it as well and like leading the way with it. Because it's really hard to be like, hey, employees, get excited about us. And then you look
Mm-hmm.
at the leadership, nobody's excited about it, right? It just doesn't line up. So a little bit of training, getting somebody in leadership involved. I think those 2 things can go a real long way.
Yeah, and I think too, companies have to realize you don't have to you don't have to open the kimono all at once. If you're
No,
not doing that currently, and you're in a company with 15,000 employees, you don't just send out an email and say, "Okay, everybody, record videos and send it." So, and there is a
exactly.
risk to that, but it is a controlled environment, and when you use certain platforms, you can always ensure before that content goes out that you've reviewed it, that there's nothing that would risk client confidentiality or anything like that. So and I love your comment around gamification, because yes, it's great when there's reward and recognition. Sometimes it's just the recognition of hey, you're a superstar, we appreciate you. But that gamification piece, and even competition between teams, like get 2 leaders involved and say, okay, it's between these 2 teams, let's see who gets the most content out there in the next 2 weeks. And even
Exactly.
focusing it on company celebrations are coming up, let's see who does the most, who contributes the most content. There's a lot of different ways to do it depending on your company and your environment. But yeah, I think it's something that's so under leveraged. And your content, all the content that you post. So first, give everybody where they can find you and follow you, because I will say I love Joel's videos, and sometimes he's out walking and you just feel like he just had a moment of inspiration, and it's such a poignant comment about do things that we just are so patterned into thinking and believing, and all of a sudden when somebody goes, okay, what is this, why do recruiters feel that we have to do this, or why do you think candidates are waiting on the other end of a call to hear you say this, it's that moment of clarity where you're like, oh yeah, and and it's clearly resonating with your audience because your following has just significantly expanded. So where can people follow you?
Yeah, I would say if you look up my name, Joel Lalgee, if you just look me up on Google, you'll see number one, you'll see my LinkedIn pops up. So that's a great place to follow me.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Realest Recruiter, if you look up just the Realest Recruiter, you'll see the rest of the profile. So that'll be my Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, YouTube channel, all of that. So yeah, just I would connect with me there. You go to my website, www.therealestrecruiter.com, to see some of the services I offer as well. I do offer some of the corporate training, along with speaking and workshops, live workshops. I'm doing one coming up next month in Vegas, which I'm excited about. And so a lot of those
Oh,
workshops are
great.
just basic stuff on like how to do an engaging video, and I like to take baby steps with people because I'm obsessed with this, but I know for a lot of people it's like, I don't know. But I like to make it easy for people and just baby steps for people as well. So www.therealestrecruiter.com. And it's got all my socials on there as well that you can just pick and choose where you want to follow
Amazing.
me.
And I've heard Joel speak, and I have it was only about 15 or 20 minutes, and I have like 4 pages of notes. And it really does demystify this fear that you might have if you're sort of in the early stages of producing content. He just gives the best advice. So highly recommend everybody, if you're not following him, to follow Joel. And thank you so much. We've
Yes,
learned so
thank you for
much.
having me.
Appreciate your time. And
Here's to the
I'm
first
gonna
of
keep following you.
many podcasts, right? That's this is the
Yes.
first, and I'm gonna have lots more. So it's honored to be the first guest.
Well, we were honored to have you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sandra. Appreciate it.
Appreciate you. Okay.